Welcome to the channel. Today we're sharing a cheating story you won't believe. If you enjoy it, please like and subscribe. Let's get started. Have you ever felt the sharp hurt of being betrayed? It's a heavy, empty feeling that I know too well. "Do me harder," she moaned, but those words weren't meant for me. They were for my brother. Right there on our bed. The shock was freezing, like ice in my veins, leaving me frozen. I would just come back from a work trip, never doubting her even once while I was away. But here I was, standing in a nightmare, back sooner than planned. She had once promised, forever and always, "I'll never leave you." Now those words sounded as empty as the love she faked. Welcome to my story. I hope you stick around. Ryan had returned home earlier than he had promised his new wife after his sales trip. He had been dating her for 4 years before asking her to marry him. That was 9 months ago, and he was eager to enjoy his well-deserved time off with his wife. Ryan then heard unusual noises coming from their bedroom and gently placed his baggage on the floor to surprise his wife as he wondered what she was doing while he was out. Then something his wife said halted him in his tracks. "Do me hard, baby." His wife Isabella moaned from their bedroom in a house he had bought for her with his own hard-earned money as she screwed someone else on his bed. "That's it, I want to feel you. There are 3 days until Ryan returns home." Ryan's fist tightened and rage flared across his face as he heard his wife's remarks. How long had she been walking out on him? How long has he been screwing her? After someone else was in there, he realized he needed to go get a blood test. He wasn't going to catch anything from his unfaithful wife, that was absolutely certain. His wrath boiled in his eyes as his own brother, whom he had covered for, pounded his wife from behind. He now understood the reason it was to screw his wife while he was working. The crashing sound of the vase breaking apart as it hit the side of his brother's head echoed through his bedroom. "Ryan!" Isabella gasped in fear as Ryan towered over them with a maddening expression in his eyes. "Baby, I can shut the hell up. Explain. Explain how long you've been screwing my brother. 1 month, 1 year? How long have we been dating for the past 4 years? You know what, I don't want to know. Here I was, working my butt off so we could have a good life, so what have you been doing? Screw that piece of trash behind my back? Max, Jack, and Leo for all I know. Ryan, I know you don't know anything. Get the heck out of my house and take that piece of junk." Ryan yelled as he stormed from the room so his rage wouldn't get the better of him. "Ryan, get the hell out." Ryan scowled at his brother, noting the blood-soaked towel he held to the side of his head. "Despite our blood connection, you are not my brother. I do not want to see you here ever again, and you will hear from my lawyer," he stated, gazing at his deceitful wife. "I apologize. Take that shit and shove it up your ass. Nina, if you didn't love me, then why did you marry me? You certainly enjoyed squandering my money, that's for sure. Your stuff will sit on the lawn. I recommend you acquire it before garbage pickup," Ryan murmured before slamming the door in his soon-to be ex-wife's face. That asshole can't even close a simple deal without someone holding his hand. Several weeks later, Ryan was lying face down on his couch. Ryan Daniels bottles lined the coffee table. Since his marriage ended, Ryan has been intoxicated whenever he wasn't at work or driving anywhere. His life may have descended into a terrible pit of sorrow, but he was not an idiot. He had expected some of his family members to support him. The word got out not one. Nobody was looking out for him. They all attempted to convince him that Isabella and Dylan were happy and that he should be glad for them. However, they seemed to forget that their happiness was what caused his demise. But they chose to accept his point of view. They made terrible choices. Ryan had recovered from his hangover after someone knocked on his front door. His hand wandered aimlessly as he searched for something to throw against the door to tell whoever was there to leave him alone. Sighing as the falling bottles aggravated his pounding headache, he turned his head when he heard the front door open. "It smells like a distillery inside," Sophie, his sister who was 4 years older than him, spoke as she entered his home. She had no right to enter the house without his permission, and he did not want any of them on his property. Her shovel leaned against the middle of her upper back, held in place by the nooks of her elbows, while she gripped her keys and pocketbook in her hand. "Jesus, Ryan, you're not even clothed," Sophie moaned as she stood at the left armrest, wearing her bridesmaid gown. "Why the heck would I be? It's my first day off. And why the hell are you in my home?" Ryan inquired, attempting to keep his voice low so as not to exacerbate his throbbing head. While staring at her outfit, Ryan could comprehend why she wore such a professional outfit despite its terrible quality. Her cheeks heated up at his words. She had watched Ryan move away from the family over the past year. Ryan ceased his visits to the workplace except for mandatory meetings and scheduled clients. Instead, he worked from home and emailed his reports to them. Their parents didn't appear to bother him as long as his job wasn't sloppy. It hasn't, as evidenced by the lack of customer complaints. She knew he was handling his workload well, even if it appeared to her that he was no longer working as many hours for their company. Sophie couldn't speak about it because he always met his monthly quota. Still, she missed her brother and the sound of his laughter filling the workplace after a long day. Her children, as well as his nephew and niece, missed him, especially because he did not show up for New Year's and New Year's as he has done since they all moved out. Do you recall which day it is? Didn't Dylan send you an invitation? Was this what it was about? Ryan asked coldly, scratching his chin and hearing his 3-day stubble rustle as he sat up. I hurled it into the flames. Ryan sighed. I got it. Okay, but is this all? I would rather go back to sleep now, thank you, Ryan replied indifferently. Please come with me. Ethan and Ella miss you, Sophie begged her brother. Next time, bring them over. Otherwise, I'm not leaving this couch for a few more hours, Ryan claimed. He was not going to the wedding. Ryan, you can't know, you do not. Ryan said it coldly, his gaze directed at his sister. Fine, Ryan, you are welcome to remain and drink yourself to death, Sophie exclaimed, putting her hands up. I truly wish you would stop, she replied, glancing at the various bottles. By the time you discover Connor screwing a woman on your bed while you are covering for him, you will have an idea of my level of intoxication. Ryan referred to her spouse as he poured a shot for himself. Otherwise, see yourself out of my home. Very good, Sophie uttered before twisting on her heel, closing the door behind her and walking away. Sipping the dark whiskey, what they didn't know was that Ryan had been seeking a new career, one that would take him far away from the city, the state, and his family, including her. However, given the state of the economy, finding work was difficult and he worked just as hard in the field. Sure, he could sell almost anything. Nonetheless, he had years of experience with robots and how many of those jobs actually came about. So he had to wait. He had to bide his time. When the opportunity arrived, and if the rate of pay matched his earnings, he would go, leaving nothing behind to entice him to return. Ryan was cleaning his face after stepping out of his restroom. He knew he couldn't drive, he still felt the booze in his system, but his head wasn't pounding anymore, so he took comfort in that. He tossed his damp towel into the bathroom. He stopped using the master bedroom because it felt too filthy, for lack of a better phrase, after what had transpired. He could only suppose it had happened many more times. So the next day, he took a friend's truck, which mercifully had no relation to his family, and drove out to a field in a fit of wrath. Regardless of how expensive the mattress was, he watched as the fire cleaned the taint from his house, and the ashes soared to the sky. He continued to use the master bathroom despite its new use as a storage room. Otherwise, it was pointless to let all of the money he had spent on the house go to waste. Ryan didn't spend any time in the adjoining room. He sat on the bed he had purchased in his underwear. He considered what he would do with the rest of the day. Obviously, he wasn't drinking because he had work the next day. He needed to be on top of his game to outperform his sibling in sales. A devilish smirk spread across his lips as the blinking light on his phone drew his attention. The light from his screen danced across his freshly shaven face, and he scowled when he saw 3 voicemails waiting for him, one from his mother, father, and ex-wife, as well as a half-dozen SMS. If it wasn't from their workplace phones, he didn't take his parents' calls, and he was certainly not going to listen to anything his ex-wife had to say. He didn't care if his parents were upset with him for not showing up, so he erased their texts, moaning as his mother called again as he was about to put them back on the nightstand beside his bed. What? No, hello, Mom? How was the wedding? What did I miss out on since I didn't attend? You know what? I'm too exhausted from this nonsense. If you want to whine, do so to Dad. Ryan interrupted their conversation, tossing his phone aside. Oddly, he felt a slight sense of relief as he lifted his blue jeans, tilted his legs, and watched his phone creep across his bed, vibrating. He picked it up because he didn't recognize the number. Hello? Ryan, do not hang up. What did she expect to happen when he heard her voice? God damn it, what? Ryan yelled into the phone as his sister called immediately after his ex-wife. Don't take that tone with me, Michael, Sophie hissed across the line. So what the heck are you calling me for? My reports are not due until the end of next week. My monthly quota has been met. What else is there to talk about? Ryan inquired heatedly over the phone. Dylan and Isabella would like to ask you something. It's quite significant. You must listen to them, Sophie insisted, encouraging her brother to reason. I'm not interested in whatever they're up to. Ryan gazed intently at his phone, emitting a sound akin to a handover. Ryan, you do not have to speak, please listen. Okay? I am pregnant, and Wei mean your brother and I want you to be godfather. Isabella replied, hoping that this might mend the divide between him and Dylan. I refuse. Think about it, Ryan. Think about what you are saying. Sophie's voice came through the telephone. Ryan remained there for a while, listening to the background noise before realizing he was on speaker. Hearing his mom's and father's chatter as well as the rest of his family and Isabella's, he could only suppose. I had given you my response, Ryan stated. I will not be held responsible for any devil offspring that she produces. The gasps that crossed the line brought an unpleasant grin to his lips. Let another idiotic conner of theirs handle that. Sure, it definitely won't be me. Ryan, that's cold, man. Dylan replied as Isabella burst into tears. It was nothing more than you taking advantage of my wife while I was out of town. The family is covering for your misdeeds. Ryan wondered how many of Isabella's family members knew the truth. Then again, he didn't mind. He got his kicks in chuckling as he finished the call. He tossed it on the bed again and finished getting dressed, grabbing his keys once head, put on his shoes and leaving his phone behind. He didn't want to deal with them as he drove to his getaway site, which he had discovered several weeks ago. As he sat on his house porch with his legs supported up on the railing, twilight fell, and he watched his neighbor's regular activities. He had returned a little over an hour ago. He wasn't surprised by what he found when he arrived. It seems that his phone had practically blown up while he was away. His smile quickly faded as he saw the two cars come to a halt in front of his house. What the hell now? Ryan murmured as he saw his family streaming out of their automobiles, doors slamming in rage. Where have you been? His father inquired in a rage as he marched up his driveway. Do you realize how worried we were? His mother cut in, matching his father's stride. So here I am. Now you want to explain why you're stomping on my grass? Ryan inquired, wondering why Sister Grace was with his sister. Hello, Ryan? Grace replied softly, pushing her thick walnut-brown hair behind her ear. Her lovely blue eyes looked at him through the lenses of her glasses. When Ryan first met her 5 years ago, she was just 20 when he and Isabella initially started dating. Some thought her slim figure was ill, but he found her alone in her house attempting to hide her red, swollen eyes. He would try to cheer her up by telling her that not all boys were horses and that someone would find her attractive. He sure did, even if she was as slender as a beanpole. It still didn't matter to him, she was still a stunning woman. Based on what he could see over his parents' heads, Grace had matured into an adult physique over the last 5 years. Hello, Grace. Ryan smiled warmly and ignored his father's question. I hope to see you at the wedding, Grace murmured, her cheeks flushing as she stared at him shyly. Can you blame me for not attending? Ryan inquired, watching as she shook her head. Do not disregard us, Ryan, his father raised his voice. Why not? You seem to dismiss my emotions all the time. See what happens when you push people who haven't done anything wrong. Praise those who have, Ryan murmured, staring down at his father. What would you have us do, Ryan? Should we expel Dylan from the family for his actions? His father's remarks remained in his throat as he noticed the gleam in his son's eyes. We understand your anger, son, and you have every right to be. His mother spoke, trying to maintain a neutral stance, a skill they had honed over the past year. It has been over a year. Do you think it is time to forgive your brother? Not as long as he's alive. Ryan, take care of your mouth. This is my house and property. You arrived uninvited. If you don't like how I talk on my own land, hey, race your car, Ryan replied, pointing to his father's expensive sedan. No one is keeping you here. Ryan, please, his mother begged with him. Simply think about it. We miss you. It's different now that you're no longer a part of our lives. You've chosen a side. If you don't like the consequences of that decision, it's on you, not me. I'm the one who has been lost for years to a woman who never loved me. For 4 years she screwed around. Who knows what happened in my own home? However, everyone treats me as if I've broken all the rules while everyone throws themselves at her and Dylan's feet just to maintain the peace. So you know what? Screw the peace. Fine, Ryan. I hope you change your mind. His mother spoke, placing her hand on her husband's arm. You're currently on a month-long leave. Do whatever you want. Go wherever you wish. Stay and sulk in this mansion for all I care. But at the end of the month, I want you to join me at the New Year's table. His father said this, hoping to push his son into forgetting his anguish. What if I am not? Ryan questioned, calling his bluff. Don't bother coming to New Year's dinner, his father said, turning on his heel and stomping off to his car, mumbling under his breath that he could no longer browbeat his youngest son the way he used to. I hadn't planned on it, Ryan remarked to his father's back. Don't say that, son. Go somewhere, relax, and return home. I would be delighted if you could join us for New Year's dinner, his mother spoke, reaching out and gently squeezing his right palm before departing to join her husband in the car. I suppose I won't be able to sway your mind with anything I say, Sophie inquired, staring up at her brother. Not a bit, Ryan responded, taking another sip of his beer. All right, but Ryan, you know we love you. Don't make us pick between you and Dylan. You may think we have, but we're not on either side. We are equally unhappy about what Isabella and Dylan did to you, but don't hold it against us. We want to keep the family together, Sophie explained before turning around. I'll wait in the car, she replied, her hand gently brushing Grace's forearm. Grace shyly approached his porch, hands behind her. How have you been? Been better. Why? Ryan inquired, eventually coming off his porch to face her at eye level. Grace's heart fluttered. Her cheeks flushed as Ryan stood in front of her. Since he went out of his way to cheer her up whenever the boys her age harassed her on a daily basis, she watched from afar as her sister discarded a nice man, a man who cared for her while she was too greedy to recognize it. Now it was her turn. She wasn't about to pass up this opportunity. She was determined to prove to him that she was not like her sister and would always be loyal to him. She had kept herself free specifically for this opportunity. Sure, she's gone on dates and played around here and there. However, the portions that really mattered, she merely wanted to touch him, to be the only one to ever touch her body in such a way. I was thinking she might operate the most fashionable women's underwear firm, not Victoria's Secret. A more elegant, inexpensive women's underwear manufacturer with materials as excellent as Victoria's Secret, just without the price. For the price of one of their embroidered bras, you could purchase one of her bra and pant sets as well as a matching teddy. And so, being this close to him made her feel like a lovesick teenager who wished for the days when he would come over simply to hear his voice and be near him, to feel closer to him. Since I have been in town for a long time, you might like to spend some time with me? Grace remarked, the soft evening breeze gently lifting her hair as she watched the lights of the surrounding houses dance over his eyes. Like a date? Ryan inquired, his attention piqued. Sure, he might have received offers once he was rid of his ex-wife. However, they lacked Grace's strength and beauty. At least that's what he believed. If you wish, Grace responded, her face flaming hot from her embarrassment at him using the word date. Get a hold of yourself, Grace. You've gone on dates previously. She'd berated herself mentally. Sure, when would you prefer to go out? Ryan inquired, feeling like he was 14 again as he asked the first girl to ever go out with him. I heard there's an orchestra playing tomorrow night, and she stepped closer to him so he could feel the heat of her body and smell her faint scent. How about you pick me up at 7? Grace inquired, her left hand gently extending out, lightly caressing his before slipping into his. Sure. Where are you staying? Do you remember where my parents were? Grace inquired, taking advantage of the opportunity to close the final space between them. Of course, Ryan nodded. Good, Grace murmured, a smile spreading across her face. I cannot wait, she whispered as her cheek touched his. Her lips brushed delicately against his ear as she revealed her private number which few people possessed. 40 minutes later, Grace giggled as she slid down onto her old bed. Her right hand lay on her heart, feeling how quickly it beat. She could not believe how wonderfully it went. She felt certain that Ryan would have said no. Her legs kicked in the air, causing her jeans to tighten against her backside. Grace, what's got you all so excited? Her mother inquired as she stood in her daughter's former bedroom. I have got a date. Grace said it eagerly as she danced in place. She smiled, glad to see her daughter so happy. She understood how terrible the years had been for her and, like any mother, she wanted her daughter to be happy. And just who is the lucky guy? Ryan, Grace spoke dreamily, unaware of her mother's expression. I want you to stay away from that man. He's broken things, her mother spoke harshly. Who do you think you are talking to? Grace spoke coldly. She may be her mother, but nobody told her what to do. Who and what I spend my time on is my concern, not yours, mother. Grace, don't use that tone with me. That man just revealed your sister's dirty laundry to the entire family. So? Isabella brought it on herself, mother. What did you imagine would happen when they asked him that? Do you not care that she lied to him and cheated him out of his life? He believed they were going to live happily ever after. Did you really expect him to jump up and down in agreement? Grace inquired, sliding into her CEO role. He could have been more tactful. Her mother huffed and crossed her arms, and her graying dark brown hair bounced across her chest. Do you realize how hurt your sister was? Whatever anguish she endured, I'm sure it was nothing compared to the 3 years she lied to him before ultimately receiving what she deserved. Grace commented, crossing her arms and confronting her mother. I do not approve. It is not up to you to make the decision. If you want to waste your time with him. She threw her arms in the air as she marched out of her daughter's room. Music from her teenage years played gently in the background. Her hips swayed as her fingertips danced around the top of the sewing machine that had sparked her business. Staring out the window of her room, she allowed her thoughts to travel down the path of the unknown future. She hoped they would have one together. Grace was willing to make things work between them, something her sister never was. She knew Isabella well enough to recognize that all she cared about was his money, not the man who earned that money. A little smile spread across her lips as she rested her hands on her stomach, thinking about what it would be like to bear their child, to hear the pitter-patter of small feet running around her luxury condo, to see Ryan chasing their child around as his or her contagious laughter filled the house. To sigh and throw her arms around herself. She couldn't wait until tomorrow night. Ryan awoke at about 7:30, his hand pressed down on his alarm. He had forgotten to turn it off when he went to bed last night, so he rolled over and pulled his sheet back up. He didn't have to deal with making calls and such. That was his plan until a knock came at his door, and he bolted up just as another knock. Throwing off his covers, wondering who would come over at such an early hour, he snatched his robe off the hook on the back of the door, pulling it across his bare chest and tying a loose knot in the belt to hide his boxers. He wasn't about to get completely dressed in order to tell someone off and go back to bed. Ryan's voice died in his throat as he yanked open the front door. He wasn't expecting to see Grace standing at his door, yet he wasn't surprised to discover such a lovely woman on his doorstep. Her rich walnut-colored hair was pulled up and tightened into a ponytail with a single curl hanging down her face, appearing to have tenderly kissed her cheek. Her beautiful blue eyes sparkled as she looked kindly at him. Grace wore little makeup. She didn't need it, and neither did his confused mind. She did not need to. His eyes involuntarily moved down the teal ruffle backless neck knitted winter sweater, noting how it clung closely to her chest. He took a dry sip and felt his Adam's apple bob as his brown eyes rested upon her thin hips, clutched tightly by her worn blue jeans. Closing his door slightly as the denim appeared to be painted on her toned thighs, he tried to conceal his emerging excitement from her gaze. His brain finally saw the bag she clutched at her side. Morning, Ryan? Grace spoke softly, her heart pounding in her chest. She didn't expect him to answer the door in just a robe. Her pulse hammered in her ears as she caught a glimpse of his naked chest. Was he naked? She groaned mentally. Morning. I am not that I am pleased to see you, but why are you here so early? Ryan inquired, hiding his lower half behind the door. I thought we could eat breakfast together, Grace remarked, bringing out a bag from the neighborhood bakery. Unless you want not to. Her statements were tinged with grief as she felt she had moved too quickly. Of course I do. Just let me put on some clothes, Ryan remarked, smiling at her. Really? Grace's head shot up. Joy danced along with her lovely eyes as he spoke. I have everything set up out here so we can enjoy eating in the morning sun. Her smile reached from ear to ear. It'll be as soon as I can, Ryan responded, his pulse racing. It had been a long time since someone made him feel this way. The flutter and the exhilaration you get when you have a connection with someone but you don't know what it is. Nonetheless, you're intrigued to see where it goes and how far that emotion would take you down that dark rabbit hole. What twists and turns would await you on that weird and hopefully joyful voyage to a place only fate could predict. Dashing into his room, his clothing flew out of his drawers as he looked for something to wear for breakfast. For some reason, he wanted to appear nice rather than disheveled and haggard like he did when he first rolled out of bed. Brushing his comb through his hair and softly showering himself with his favorite fragrance, Ryan wanted Grace to enjoy the morning. She did, after all, travel all this way to visit him. Grace sat enthusiastically in her chair. She had set up the table on his porch to make it as personal as possible while enjoying quants, fresh fruit, cream cheese, and 2 bottles of orange juice. Her blood pounded in her ears as she heard the doorknob turn. Her nose flared as she caught the aroma of his perfume in the wind. She felt her mind go blank as Ryan went out onto the porch, his lips forming a pleasant grin as he carefully pulled out the patio chair. "I hope I didn't make you wait, Grace," Ryan replied as he fell into the seat, not clearing his throat as he noticed himself stammering. "Not at all," Grace said, hoping he wouldn't notice how much her cheeks burned. "I hope you enjoy what I bought for us," she remarked, waving her hand over the goods. "I believe I will." "Yet, the companionship adds to the overall enjoyment of the meal," Ryan whispered, observing Grace's cheeks rapidly becoming warm. Grace mumbled something behind her hand which hid her shaking lips. "Shall we?" Ryan asked. He was concerned that his covert flirtations would be unwelcome, but Grace appeared to relish them. "So, Grace, what have you been doing over the last few years? Last I heard, you left for Boston a year into your college career," he added as he broke open the croissant. Grace's ears pricked up. His hands had occupied her thoughts and eyes, observing the delicate way he held the flaky pastry and wondering if he would hold her with the same gentleness if or when her body pressed against his. "I sort of operate a women's clothing brand," Grace mumbled, her solitary bangs flowing before her as she fiddled with her own croissant, quivering as she felt and saw his palm covering hers. "That is wonderful." Her parents never praised her accomplishments. To them, she was always the strange, silent child they had nurtured. She was not the strong, powerful owner of her own multimillion-dollar firm that she had matured into. It wasn't as if she could find fault with her parents. All parents were like that, or so she thought. Still, seeing Ryan laud her meant everything to her. His hand stayed on hers, sending a comforting warmth throughout her body. "Thank you," Grace said quietly, rolling her palm over her fingertips and softly playing along his wrist, feeling how his pulse raced, secretly thrilled that she had the same effect on him as he had on her. "So, what have you been doing since leaving my sister? Are there any women I should be careful of?" she inquired with a mischievous smirk. "Have there been any offers?" "Sure. Did I take up their offers?" "Not for a million years. I understand Isabella's actions are difficult to forgive, no matter how much everyone is urging you to let go," Grace stated, her thumb brushing across his knuckles. "Who knows, if I play my cards well, I could convince you to come to Boston to visit me," she replied hesitantly, stroking and brushing behind her ear. "Perhaps," Ryan nodded. Ryan was uncertain about the direction of this conversation, however. He was keen to see this through. Laughter permeated the air as Grace and Ryan talked about their breakfast. She loved how his eyes never left her as she told him about her years in Boston and how they enjoyed their peaceful supper together, as if it were just the two of them. How she imagined it would feel if her sister hadn't kept him to herself. So what could she do? Isabella was always self-centered as they grew up. Her miscalculation, however, worked to her advantage. Grace could now show him how a woman should treat the guy she loves. However, like all wonderful things, it had to come to an end. The last drop of orange juice, along with the cheese and fruit, had vanished. How she just wanted to spend the day with him. Groaning because she knew it would appear too needy, that was something Ryan did not require at the moment. He needed to know that she was not like her sister and would never do to him what Isabella had done. Her gaze shifted to the right, where she noticed Sophie's car approaching the curb, knowing that now was the moment to leave. Plus, she believed that this would increase Ryan's desire for her. "Well, it appears you have company," Grace responded cheerfully, seeing how his eyes hardened as he glanced at his sister's automobile. "No, you do not. I would love to remain, Ryan, but a female has to stay mysterious," Grace remarked, giving him a seductive look. How that sincere smile warmed her heart. "Plus, I have a spa appointment and want to look my best for tonight," she explained, pulling her chair back as Sophie exited her car. "Grace, even if it was only a towel, I'm confident you'd make it look amazing." Ryan said this as he stood up to accompany her to her car. Grace was at a loss for words. It was unusual for someone to leave her speechless. Her thoughts were so jumbled that she didn't see them standing at the door of her rental car with Sophie standing a few yards away, trying not to step between them. "Thank you for breakfast with me." "Thank you for bringing it," Ryan answered cheerfully. You are welcome to come over at any time, she murmured, dragging him closer to her, nibbling her lip as his hand rested on her left hip. That would be tremendously enjoyable, she whispered, and then embraced him with her silky soft lips as she took her first bite of the man she had been romantically involved with for the past 5 years. Her fingertips brushed against his waist, and her arms curled around his torso. She felt his tongue glide into her lips. Her lips touched his as they tasted each other. Her hands went up his back, and her claws scratched against his shirt as she lost herself in the kiss. Her chest rose quickly. Her breath was thick as she drew away. She was clearly panting after their kiss. "What? I'll see you tonight," Grace said as her hand groped about for the door lock. "I can't wait," Ryan responded with a seductive smile, waving to her as she drove out of his driveway, watching her car fade into the distance and wondering how tonight would go. "Ryan, can we speak?" Sophie inquired from behind him. "What about?" Ryan sighed. He assumed they'd said everything they needed to say last night. "Please, Ryan, look at me," Sophie said as her feet glided down the smooth blades of grass. "Isn't it appropriate for you to be at work?" Ryan inquired as he turned to face his sister. "Dad gave me a couple of hours off so we can chat. It's just us, no one else," Sophie said. When he wasn't busy, diverting her attention from the monotonous chore of keeping the company's records straight, ensuring that their employees, vendors, and every penny from their contracts were in their accounts, she missed the hours they would spend at her desk. "Do you want to talk?" "Fine. Do not expect me to reciprocate," Ryan replied, strolling back to his house, knowing it would require a thorough cleaning before he could invite Grace over. He didn't want her to see how bad things had gotten, so he entered his house with his sister at his back. "I'm all right with chatting as long as you listen, little brother," Sophie stated angrily. She understood how difficult it was to deal with an unfaithful husband. She and Connor had gone through a hard stretch a few years ago. They hadn't been intimate in quite some time. Raising Ethan and Ella took a toll on them. Connor had left his phone behind one day, and as a good, watchful wife, she knew his PIN code even though he didn't believe she did. So, as she cleaned the house, she heard his phone ding and his texts began to stream in. Her curiosity had gotten the better of her. She wished she hadn't taken up his phone. She sobbed into her pillow as she read the texts he was sending to a lady, which he acknowledged. She called him out on it right now, but it only got as far as messages. She felt deceived by it. It took a long time for her to regain faith in him, and she spent many hours in couples counseling. They worked through it, though she still had her reservations. Still, that was nothing compared to what her brother had witnessed. She was astounded by his self-control, which he had demonstrated that day. Sophie wasn't sure if she could be that restrained if she had walked in on Connor, hilt deep into a woman on their bed. Yeah, Ryan muttered as he entered his kitchen to retrieve some trash bags. "Do you ever air this house out?" Sophie inquired, opening the living room window. "No." "Okay. I see you're getting along with Grace. I'm glad someone can make you smile again," Sophie murmured, turning as she heard her brother enter the room. "Yeah, what about it?" Ryan inquired indifferently. The bag rustled as he began stuffing it with bottles from his coffee table. "Nothing, Ryan. I'm just happy to see you smiling again." Sophie expressed her happiness as she assisted him in organizing his living room. She was relieved to see her brother emerge from the dark hole he had fallen into over the previous year. She knew that no matter what she said, it would never be enough to ease her pain. It was something only time could fix. She just wanted him to know that they were there for him, no matter what it took. Sophie yearned for the chance to participate in his life instead of feeling excluded for the previous year. "So, have I heard anything about a date?" Sophie inquired coyly and lightly giggling as she noticed her brother blush. She hadn't seen him blush like that since he was 13, when the neighbor girl who lived in the house to their left gave him his first kiss. "I'm glad you're finally leaving this house," she said, nodding her head. His living room looked presentable once again. "Ryan, why is there so much junk in this room?" Sophie inquired, perplexed as she stood at the doorway leading to the master bedroom. "I converted it into a storage room after that day," Ryan stated as he went out the door holding the full bag. "Why are you not using it?" She stopped herself after he shot her a glance as he walked back inside. "Right, I probably wouldn't want to sleep in the same room if Connor did that," she added as she shut the door. "So why haven't you relocated if you can't take living here? Have you seen the market recently? If I sold this house right now, I would definitely receive less than a fraction of the original cost for it. I'm definitely not a landlord," Ryan explained as he pushed past his sister to handle the kitchen. So how about we have a double date? Sophie inquired as she entered the room. Do what? Ryan inquired, gazing at his sister as if she had grown a second head. What? Sophie huffed. Her hands lay on her hips. I would want to know what this woman's plans are for my darling little brother. I am not about to allow another member of their family to damage you. Plus, Connor and I could need a night out. Sophie was a little envious of Grace. It had been years since Connor kissed her in the same way that her brother did with Grace. She hoped this would put a spring back in Connor's stride. It was beginning to feel like the months before when she discovered those texts all over again. Please, Ryan. I am not asking for much a night out, only the four of us, Sophie pleaded. That sounds like a lot to me, Ryan complained while loading the dishwasher. Please, Sophie pleaded, batting her eyelids at him. We will see. Ryan's vehicle door closed when he arrived at Grace's parents' house at 7:50 that night. Looking in the rearview mirror, he noticed the blanket and picnic basket. He hoped Grace liked what he had brought over. While he had a bottle of wine, he wouldn't drink more than 2 glasses because he was driving. Hoping to find the ideal location on the lawn to enjoy the music and each other's company. That was how Ryan hoped the night would go. As he moved towards the front entrance, he tugged on the lapels of his black suit jacket and placed his deep blue dress shirt tightly against his chest. His dress clothes were pristine and clean, and the shine on his dress shoes glistened in the porch light. Ryan wanted Grace to remember this night vividly. He was unsure if it would go any further because she lived in Boston. Nonetheless, he might make this night memorable. He exhaled deeply before grasping the door with his knuckles. Yes? Grace's father answered the door saying, It's you. You have some nerve, he sneered. Daniel, I have no idea what you are talking about. Ryan spoke indifferently. You are well aware of what you have done, Daniel gave a snarl. Take it off, Dad. Grace's voice wafted towards him from somewhere deep inside her childhood house. Don't be furious with Ryan because Isabella can't shut her legs. Grace, I won't let you talk like that in my house. Daniel let out a bark. So, I think I'll stay somewhere else. Grace described how her rich walnut-colored hair bounced on her shoulders as she stepped around the corner of the corridor. Her pale blue eyes clustering as Ryan glanced over her father's shoulder. She seldom wore her contacts. This was one of those evenings. The diamonds and rubies on her earrings and necklace glittered when light touched the gem surface. Well, if you want to risk your life for this man, Daniel twisted his lips as he looked at Ryan. Then it's up to you, Daniel exclaimed, striding out of the doorway. Ryan was at a loss for words as Grace stood in front of him in a gray low-cut scoop neck-narrow fit knitted dress that hugged all the right contours, revealing the outline of appealing shapely hips before halting mid-thigh. Her manicured toes and their glossy nail polish peeked from her open-toe lace-up stiletto heels. Her soft, alluring perfume entered his nose, lulling him into stormy waters, and the phrase slipped his lips as his thoughts were dazzled by her beauty. Do you like it? Grace inquired with a sensual smile, touching her lips as she performed a small spin for him. Grace, you look great, Ryan replied, and you look. Her heart was fluttering as her gaze traveled down his torso. Grace purred with desire. Shall we go? Ryan inquired, moving back to his left and extending out his right arm to her. Yes. Her fingertips danced over the nook in his elbow. Grace smiled sweetly at him as she gently laid her hand on his arm and closed the door behind her. As they moved towards Ryan's car, her hips swung seductively. She could not believe what was occurring. She had always imagined this would happen. Grace was overjoyed that it was finally happening. Her ruby-painted lips grinned up at him as she climbed into the passenger seat. She wanted him to understand how much she wanted their new relationship to succeed, to be by his side when they are both elderly and gray. She pulled out her phone, knowing that her flight was in a few days. She couldn't be away for much longer, booking a hotel room since her parents were being stubborn about organizing her next return trip because this was merely the beginning. Grace stepped to the side as Ryan laid out the blanket for them while the orchestra began to prepare for tonight's performance. Thank you, Grace murmured gently, grinning as her cupped palm scooped crumbs from the crackers she was munching on. A piece of creamy thick cheese watching the evening sun play across his face while music played in the background. She had almost forgotten about the other individuals who had come to watch the show with her as the breeze drifted gently across the grassy knoll. It felt like they were the only ones in the world at the time. She rested her head on Ryan's right shoulder as the first stars of the night appeared on the black velvet curtain, snuggling close to him as they watched the band perform. Once they had departed, Ryan drove to replace her, and as they approached the home, Grace stated, "I have to fly back to Boston in 2 days. I want this to work, Ryan. I want you to know that I am the only one you will ever need. I hope you want it too. However, considering what my sister did, I understand that it will take some time for you, so should we take it one day at a time? Are you asking someone out?" Ryan inquired with a faint smile on his lips. "Yep." Grace hummed and nodded fervently, going out with a stunning woman as Grace waited for Ryan's response. He grinned internally at her thrilled and shy expression. "I would be foolish to say no," Ryan said. "Ryan." Grace shrieked and put her arms around him. "You don't know how long I've been waiting to hear those words." She sighed contentedly as she hugged him close. "Don't you mind if we eat breakfast again?" she inquired as Ryan opened the passenger door for her. "I would love to," Ryan remarked, grinning down at her and offering his hand to her. "I had hoped you'd say that," Grace replied, hooking her arm around his as he led her to the front door of her parents' house. She exhaled happily. "I really enjoyed tonight, Ryan. So did I. I hope you're ready for this, Mom, because what I have now will surely be enough." Grace groaned when her mother waited in the doorway. "Do you have an idea what time it is?" "I was worried sick," her mother exclaimed. "I am 26, not a tiny kid." Grace huffed as her mother hauled her inside the home. "Can I call you Ryan?" she yelled as her father took her further inside the home. "I believe you should be heading home." Her harsh eyes hardened as she shut the door in Ryan's face. The day before New Year's, Ryan's connection with Grace had been progressively improving over the last few weeks. He also made a detour to Boston after his unplanned sales trip a week earlier. How he felt like a teenager as Grace waited at the departure gate. He had spent 2 days in that metropolis before going home. However, those 2 days were fantastic. Grace had shown him around the city, including her company's offices. He had to admit to some of the items she had shown him. He pondered how they would appear on her physique. He simply appreciated her company. Everything she mentioned was right. He wasn't prepared for sex yet, not after what her sister had done to him. Ryan wanted to be in the correct state of mind when they continued their relationship. He did not want to rush things with her. He wanted this to succeed, even if it meant taking a red-eye flight to Boston to see her. Ryan was relaxing on his couch watching television. He would sheepishly look at his phone. He contacted her a few hours earlier, but she hadn't responded back, and he didn't want to come off as clingy. That never looked well in the early stages of a relationship. He was still a bit nervous. If she was busy, she usually texted him back within an hour. As he heard a knock on his door, he quickly sat up. Ryan was not expecting anyone. Sure, his parents and sister had been lighting up his phone, asking him if he was coming over to their house tomorrow, which he swiftly ignored. His jaw fell in amazement as the door flung wide, revealing Grace standing on his doorstep with her luggage by her feet. "Ryan!" Grace exclaimed joyfully as she wrapped her arms around his neck, laying a long-awaited kiss on his lips. She'd been longing to do that throughout the journey. "I like that expression," she added with a huge smile as she moved back. "Why haven't you called?" "I would have come to get you," Ryan stated. I was quite thrilled to see her. "I wanted it to be a surprise," Grace murmured shyly, pressing the toe of her shoe on the threshold of the doorway while placing her hands behind her. "And by the expression on your face, you were—" She smiled again as she spoke. "Of course I was. Why shouldn't I be?" Ryan replied, enveloping her in another tight hug and enjoying her aroma. He nuzzled her neck, feeling how she laid her cheek against his chest, groaning as she clung to him closely. Grace had missed being in his arms since he left Boston. Every time she felt his arms around her, she rested her hands in his while standing at arm's length. She loved how his eyes looked at her as if she were the only lady in the universe. How could my sister be so dumb to abandon a man like Ryan? She asked herself. His gaze dropped to her back. "You weren't staying with your parents?" "Nope," Grace replied with an impish grin. "I figured I would stay with you if you got closer to him." "I don't mind if you are. The girlfriend stays here, do you?" she inquired, pressing her chest into his. Ryan smiled and answered, "Not one bit. I have just the room you need to relax in," he added, never letting go of her hand as she felt for her bag. "I like it," Grace murmured as she looked around the main bedroom. However, something seemed odd as she peered around. She could not feel him in the room. "Don't you sleep here?" she inquired, knowing that had to be where he once shared a bed with her sister. Ryan shook his head. Then I don't want it, Grace exclaimed, putting her nose in the air. Her lips formed a nice little pout as she moved him through her eyelashes. So where exactly will you stay? Ryan inquired, trying not to smile as her arm slid around his waist, drawing him against her. Her beautiful blue eyes were filled with hunger as she peered into his. Grace purred, her body pressing against his chest. I'm not sure if I'll be able to keep my hands to myself if this intense sensation makes her shudder as his fingertips skim down her spine. My tight body has been pressing on me all night, Ryan murmured, placing his right hand on her hips and watching her eyes flicker as he gently massaged her. I'm willing to take the chance. Grace breathed heavily. Her heart pounded in her chest. Ryan made her feel attractive, desired, and most importantly, loved. Grace nestled into Ryan as they sat on his couch after unpacking her belongings in his room, watching a movie that neither of them were paying attention to, just as Grace wanted it. She wanted his attention so she could fill this house with happy memories and perhaps replace all the unpleasant ones. Her gaze shifted to his phone as she heard it ping, then to his face, where a scowl formed on his lips. Bad news? Grace inquired curiously. No, it's just my mother bothering me about New Year's again, Ryan murmured. Her eyes raced back and forth as a malicious thought entered her mind. I think you should leave. Why? Ryan inquired, gazing at her skeptically. So, my sister will be there, correct? Grace asked. A mischievous grin emerged on her lips. Probably. Why? Ryan asked again. Her fingers went lightly up his left thigh, twisting her body just enough so that his left arm rested on her. You accompany me in order to flaunt your beautiful girlfriend and to demonstrate to Isabella that you have found a more desirable and seductive woman, Grace purred. Her tongue curled out and teased Ryan's top lip. She wanted to demonstrate to her sister that she had made the wrong decision by throwing away something that would never be returned to her. You devious minx, Ryan spoke, his grin reaching from ear to ear. But are you certain you want to parade yourself out like that? I'm more than delighted to spend tomorrow with just the two of us. Her heart melted at the words. Grace would want to spend the holiday alone with him, watching him work on the stove while Ryan made supper for them. She knew he could cook. He walked around her kitchen as if he had always been there, something she planned to accomplish in the near future. I'm sure, Ryan. I wouldn't have proposed it if I wasn't interested, Grace replied harshly. All right, as long as you're cool with it, Ryan replied, brushing his fingertip across her thigh and pulling up his mother's phone number. He smiled slightly, knowing that this year's New Year's dinner might be entertaining. Ryan, I didn't expect you to call because you've been screening my calls, his mother continued, piling on the guilt trip. I'm calling you now, Mom. So, shall we see you here tomorrow? Your father may not have shown it, but he was heartbroken that you weren't home for Easter. You know how he enjoys celebrating it, Ryan responded. You'll need to set out another plate, Ryan added before his mother could go on about what else he had overlooked, looking at Grace as she nodded vehemently. What do you mean, Ryan? Are you dating anyone? His mother asked, and her amazement was obvious. I certainly am, unless you don't want us to attend. Ryan redirected her guilt trip towards his mother. Baby, I'm so happy for you, his mother exclaimed joyfully. Of course, you and your girlfriend are welcome to visit tomorrow. However, Isabella's parents will also be present. I hope that does not make you reconsider your decision to come tomorrow. Hold on. Ryan set his phone to mute and spoke. Your parents will be present, do you? His voice stopped when the same devious smile appeared on her lips. Yeah, that's okay, he responded as Grace gently clasped his hand. Ryan, you have no clue how pleased I am to hear this. He spoke with his mother over the phone. So, when will we see you tomorrow? Around 1. Ryan said his final goodbyes before hanging up the phone. Ryan puffed as Grace pushed herself on top of him, a smile emerging on his lips as Grace chuckled above him. For the next 5 minutes, while he lay on his back, they had a pretty heated make-out session on his couch that night. While Ryan lay in bed, waiting for Grace to return from the restroom, his hand traced along the emptiness beside him, knowing that he had made the wrong decision by choosing Isabella as his wife. She never made him feel as alive as when Grace was around. Was this merely the honeymoon stage of their relationship? Was it because he was so broken after Isabella that he wanted someone to love him the way he imagined Isabella loved him? Ryan wasn't sure how to respond to such queries. He hoped that was not a transient emotion. I hope it doesn't dissipate one day. Ryan, Grace's voice was full of lust and longing as she stood in the doorway, the hallway light illuminating her figure. "I take it you enjoy the outfit?" Grace asked sinfully. Her eyes rolling down her body flared up toward him. "Very much so." Ryan nodded, trying not to drool while taking in her figure. "Good," Grace announced confidently as she approached the bed. This would be the new addition for next year. They created tender affection. Grace was sighing happily as she laid her head on his chest, her hand lightly brushing against it, knowing this was always meant to be. "How do I look?" Grace inquired as she stood in Ryan's bedroom, wearing a spaghetti-strapped black slip dress that reached just below her knees. Her matching pumps gave her legs more definition. She gave a slight turn as he stood there in a plain blue dress shirt and jeans. They did not make Grace look slutty. On the contrary, they made her appear smart. Her matching shawl nestled in the nooks of her elbows and her hands rested before her, holding her small clutch. Grace had spent a lot of time in the master bathroom because of the space to fix her hair just how she wanted it. She wanted to walk into that house and surprise everyone, especially her sister, when they saw her on Ryan's arm. Her emerald earrings fluttered as she smiled warmly at Ryan, whose gaze traveled up and down her body. "Beautiful," Ryan stated matter-of-factly. "Why did you dress up? It's just New Year's supper." "Why, Ryan," Grace said, her toned legs bridged the gap between them. "Why wouldn't I want to show off my new boyfriend? Why wouldn't I want to witness my sister's surprised expression knowing I had the superior man?" Grace said, her lips curving into a wicked smile as her painted lips approached his and then matched her smile. "We shouldn't let them down now, should we?" Ryan inquired, enjoying how her body felt against his, as if the gods were the fates who created this woman just for him. "No, I believe we shouldn't," Grace stated, her blue eyes glinting as she tasted the man who dominated her mind once more. "What a gentleman," she groaned teasingly as he held the passenger door open for her, blowing him a kiss and chuckling. I was pleased to see that smile finally becoming a significant feature on his face as he moved his body around his car. "I'm so glad she was the one who got him out of that dark pit." She prayed that her light would always guide him when he became lost, just as she hoped his would do the same for her. Her eyes shone with love for him as her hand slipped into his as Ryan backed out of his driveway. She kissed the back of Ryan's palm, silently promising him that she would always be by his side. "It will be fine, Ryan," Grace said softly, clutching his hand as they turned into his parents' circle driveway. "I'm here. You simply concentrate on me. Don't think about her," she urged angrily, aware that his tightening grip on the driving wheel was due to seeing his brother's automobile. "Why would I think about her while you are standing by my side?" Ryan asked. I saw how her face was turning hot red. Ryan and Grace gushed. "But go ahead. Talk all sweet like me," she murmured, fanning her face. "Grace, believe me, you are twice as intelligent, strong, and 10 times as attractive as Isabella will ever be," Ryan said, pleased with his ability to perplex this sublime, successful, and bright woman. "Well," Grace stammered, hurriedly opening the door to try to flee. She felt her chest heat as he chuckled behind her. "Did you realize you were so cute? Do you get all embarrassed about this?" Ryan inquired, seeing how her cheeks became a deeper shade of scarlet, unwilling to look him in the eye. She was wiping off imaginary lint from her clothing, her arm wrapped around his. Even though he had made her flush furiously, she still wanted to feel his body next to hers. "It's not every day that you hear the man you've been crushing on for so long acting provocative," Grace murmured, playfully poking her nose in the air, feeling her smile rise from the corner of her lips. Her eyes widened as Ryan whispered into her ear, "My God, my God." She repeated them in her head as his lusty words infused her body with an insatiable heat. "Uncle Ryan," Ella shouted with excitement as her 6-year-old legs propelled her across his parents' yard. Her high-pitched voice drew the attention of others who were not expecting it. Ryan braced himself when Ella crashed into his legs. Her delighted eyes looked up at him as she carefully grabbed his legs. "Ryan." Sophie eagerly followed her daughter. "I assumed you wouldn't be coming today," Sophie sighed cheerfully into his shoulder. Ryan looked down to his left, where Ethan's little hands slipped into his. His contagious smile looked up at him. His innocent eyes conveyed how pleased he was to meet his uncle. "It's been a while, man," Connor spoke while his wife walked to the side. "I'm sure you helped bring my rebellious little brother here." Sophie smiled as she stated this. Grace smirked at Ryan and admitted that she might have had a hand in it. "Don't you look stunning," Sophie said, eyeing Grace. She held Grace at arm's length. She gave her husband a sly look, noting how he was eyeing her out without appearing to do so. "Sophie, please do not stand there," his mother urged as she stood on the porch. "Bring your brother here," she replied with a broad, cheerful smile. "Come on, you two." Sophie smiled at her brother and Grace as she grasped each of their hands, trying to recall when Connor looked at her in the same way her brother did when he appeared to Grace. "My name is Ryan. You didn't tell me you were bringing Grace, right?" his mother inquired. "I was trying to recall her name. You did not notify me that your date would be Isabella's sister," she spoke, her gaze drawn to her son as she invited Grace to the celebrations. "You didn't ask," Ryan replied indifferently. "Grace," Isabella gasped as her drink slipped from her grasp as she stepped out onto the porch. Her jealousy blazed in her veins as her gaze moved down her sister's body rather than her own. Knowing that the sweater that concealed the increasing bump and her simple blue trousers were nothing compared to the gorgeous outfit Grace was wearing. Her envy was clear in her eyes as she observed her sister's determination to Ryan. "Dylan, go get a broom and a dustpan," his mother placed an order. "We do not want the kids to step into the glass." Dylan couldn't keep his eyes off Grace. He had thought he had overcome his brother, that he had obtained a more beautiful sister, and that he had gotten the better of his brother. Yet it looked like he was mistaken. "Right," Dylan muttered, moving into his childhood home. He knew he'd have to break his brother yet again. He only needed to figure out how to approach Grace. He enjoyed breaking up relationships as he had with his brother. It was his finest triumph to date. In addition, his brother's 16-month-long ban was a great benefit. "Grace, what are you doing here?" Isabella asked as she stepped across the broken glass. "What does it look like?" Grace responded, pulling her body closer to Ryan and feeling his muscles stiffen as her sister stood by Ryan's mother. "I'm accompanying my boyfriend to his family's New Year's meal," she continued, letting Isabella know she was outpacing her in every way possible while secretly relishing the expression on her sister's face. "However, we can always leave if we are not welcome here." "What?" Ryan's father barked. "I will not entertain a guest in my home and make them feel uncomfortable," he remarked as he walked towards the patio entrance. "Why didn't you notify us that you were coming to town with him?" Grace's mother spoke, attempting to conceal her disdain from Ryan and his parents. "Well, given how you acted the last time I was home, I decided not to inform you," Grace said, putting on airs. "Besides, Ryan enjoys my stay at his residence, don't you, baby?" She spoke seductively into his ear, grinning at her mother's expression and her sister's rage. "Don't be furious, sister. Someone was bound to swoop in and take such an incredible man," Grace said, letting the backs of her fingers sweep down Ryan's right cheek. "When did you throw away someone as good as this man for that?" she asked, her gaze fixed on Dylan as he stood in the doorway with a broom in hand. She measured him up. The moment she saw him, she knew he was a scumbag. Grace had also seen several men like him in Boston. A quick glance reveals no one. When his brother gave him that smug smile, Dylan kept his wrath under control. He felt a shiver in the air when he got her into his bed. It simply added to his satisfaction with her. Ryan and Isabella attempted to exude charm. "I know I harmed you, but did you have to seek correction, sister?" "I went after him," Grace said. She shot her sister a difficult smile. "I must say, I definitely came out on top," she remarked, letting her implication hang in the air. "You liked that, didn't you?" Ryan nodded, unconcerned about how uncomfortable he and her family were. Grace flirted with him. Sophie glanced at her husband and wondered why he never spoke to her like that. Despite their 7-year marriage, Sophie still craved flirtation. Grace clearly felt sexy at that moment. "Ryan, please enter the house. The game is about to begin," his father announced. His smile spread to his eyes. He was relieved to have his son back home. "Go on," Grace remarked casually, caressing his biceps. "I will join you soon." Months had gone by since that memorable New Year's Day. New Year's was just as enjoyable for Ryan as New Year's was. Had even seen Dylan with a split lip. He couldn't say what the cause was, yet Grace remained by his side the remainder of the day, only whispering to him that Dylan was an ass. He could not argue with her on that issue. Nevertheless, he confronted his brother while Grace waited in his car, knocking him out cold. Dylan scoffed at how comfortable Grace's bump felt in his hand. Dylan had kept his head down since then, staying out of his way. That glass jar of his could only take so much abuse. Ryan was madly in love with Grace, and she knew her time was coming. She could see in his eyes that he wanted to take things further, and she couldn't wait for that day. Ryan and Grace were having a make-out session when her phone rang. "Let me handle this, and he'll compensate you nicely," Grace purred as her lips brushed against his. "Sure," Ryan nodded, realizing she takes her job seriously. "What?" Ryan turned his head and watched Grace pace the corridor. "Are you telling me she couldn't close a multimillion-dollar deal?" He raised an eyebrow as he overheard Grace practically scream into the phone. "I knew I should have handled this myself." When her hand touched the wall, Ryan rose and got out of bed. "Tell the owners that I'm on the first flight out. Dismiss that incompetent woman. Hopefully, I can salvage this transaction." Grace turned as she heard footsteps behind her. A terrible thought came to her mind. Grace responded, "It'll be there in a few hours," before hanging up the phone. "Someone messed up, sweetheart, and the hot boss needs to go solve it." Ryan completed her sentence. "Yep," Grace hummed. "I'm sorry I had to cut our time short," she apologized. "No, I understand," Ryan replied, pressing her closer to him. "I have an idea," though Grace flashed a naughty smile across her lips. "How about you join me? Do you have years of experience negotiating deals like this?" Grace remarked, hoping he'd say yes. "We wouldn't have to stop this night until we were together again." Ryan thought about it for a long time. Was selling women's lingerie any different than selling robots and parts? "I don't know, Grace. I have no idea how to market underpants." "I know what looks good on your small body," Ryan murmured, always proud of himself for making those cheeks of hers redden. The simple Grace's voice stammered. He was really thrilled to say that he thought she was hot. "Just run the numbers for them. How much cheaper it would be for them to stock my goods rather than my competitors, and so on. Something I'm confident you can accomplish exceptionally well," she stated, her palms resting on his chest. She had her personnel investigate his sales record and professional life since New Year's, following what his vile brother attempted to do. It was her dream that she could persuade him to leave his position and come work for her, not only because she felt he would be a valuable asset to her firm, but also because she wanted to take care of him in the days and weeks apart that were becoming too much for her. "Okay, if you believe I can do it, I don't want to ruin your business," Ryan said quietly. "I wouldn't have asked if I didn't believe you could handle it," Grace replied, tasting his lips once again. "So, the question is, how long should I pack? Forever, eternally. I'm not going to let you go," Grace whispered ominously while speaking on the phone. She hoped that everything went as planned. If it occurred, Ryan would only be coming to this location to submit his resignation and pack away his belongings. Then their lives together might really begin. "I hope not," Ryan chuckled as they entered his bedroom. The engines of the private plane roared as they rushed down the runway. Grace had rented a plane because there were no commercial flights to the location where the major outlet's headquarters were. She sought to have her items displayed in the women's department of their numerous stores. They soon arrived for the conference. "Thank you for meeting with me," Grace said, greeting the CEO, CFO, and VP of Sales and Marketing. Her own CFO and marketing director sat across from them at the long oak table. "Yes, tell us what your company can provide that we didn't hear about yesterday." The CEO expressed his dissatisfaction with her associate by asking a pointed question. "Poor performance." "I believe I can answer that," Ryan remarked, moving up to the table and noticing the glances of hesitation in the eyes of the two women seated near Grace. Grace, on the other hand, nodded in support. "What if I may?" he asked gently, gesturing toward the PowerPoint projector. Matthew, the company's CFO, nodded with his colleagues. "As you can see here," Ryan explained, pointing to the graph on the whitewashed wall, "the quantity you buy in bulk from brands like Hugo Boss, Chantel, and others limits the amount you can sell in your stores and the number of units your company turns over each month. And I understand that as the owners of this firm, you don't want things to sit on your shelves, taking up valuable space in your stores if your clients can't afford the products you're offering," he stated, noticing the men begin to nod in agreement. "We at Jade's Boutique can offer a far cheaper and comparable, if not superior quality product that I am confident your consumers would like, especially given the price," Ryan remarked, smiling at the men, hearing them chuckle and watching them nod as he compared what they paid their present vendors to what they could obtain from Grace's company for the same amount. Then they calculated how much each bra and pant set would cost in their respective stores after applying their own markup. He knew he had hooked them when they sat up straighter in their seats. Ryan looked at Grace as she slightly nudged her marketing director, who rose from her chair and departed the room to find the models they needed to show off the clothing. "Gentlemen, if you will," Ryan nodded to the other side of the room as the three women entered, each wearing a robe. We believed that a good demonstration of our product would be a more effective selling point than simply providing figures. He gestured for them to remove their robes. These are from our new autumn range, Grace explained with the composure of a confident CEO. As you can see, gentlemen, our products are less expensive than those of our competitors, but that doesn't mean we compromise on the quality of the fabric we use, she said, observing how the men eyed the half-naked women as they showcased her wares. She slightly noted how Ryan's gaze remained on her rather than the gorgeous women whose assets and other items were on display. How do they feel compared to, say, Lace Empire? The CEO asked one of the models to split the thong she was wearing and elevate her hips. Very good. You don't really feel like you're wearing them, but when you move in a certain manner, they move with you, allowing you to feel how soft they are against your skin. Don't overlook those pesky wires, one of the other models sneered. These do not have them. They have no trouble sustaining these babies, she giggled. Thank you, ladies, Grace said, turning to her marketing director to lead them out of the room. And you say you can guarantee that if we buy from you, your product will sell more than anyone else? If you look here, Ryan said, pulling up the company spreadsheet she had already provided, the order of units sold over the last 3 years. As you can see, the number of units ordered has increased with each successive quarter, displaying a graph that tracked the increase in money received after each quarter. Ryan could envision CEOs in the robotics or lingerie industries crunching the numbers in their brains before turning off the PowerPoint. Grace nodded to him, signaling that his role in these negotiations had ended. He stepped aside to allow Grace to assume control without his interference. Ryan, you were fantastic, Grace shouted with delight when they emerged from the conference, which had lasted another 3 hours after Ryan left the room. She threw her arms around him, smiling into his neck as she felt his embrace. Thanks, Ryan answered sheepishly. He was simply bullshitting his way through most of it. You've earned it. She planted a deep, passionate kiss on his lips and told him how much she liked it. I might have to pull you away from that company and make you work for me, Grace explained, sowing her seed. Only if you can equal my commission, Ryan joked. You'll do better by adding 6 to it. Grace said this with all sincerity. Wait, what? Ryan expressed surprise. That's correct. Come to work for me. This is not a joke, Grace remarked sincerely, trying to hide her smile at his surprised expression. Do you want a date? Not if you don't allow it, Grace spoke, her lips scarcely an inch apart from his. I told you months ago that I wish to care for you, and I know you'll do well once you're away from that area, she added, pressing herself on him. And that begins now. Yes, Ryan asked coyly. That day turned into 2. They had totally satisfied themselves with their bodies. Grace had asked whether he still felt her offer was a joke. He was unaware that she had already worked out a contract for him. She couldn't keep a smile on her face as she set it before him, regaining some of their lost vigor. Her heart melted as she watched Ryan read over the contract, laughing when his jaw dropped at the signing bonus, which her company was willing to offer him. You can now enjoy a safe flight, Grace added a wanted purr, reminding him that every second he was away, she would miss him. And so, Ryan returned to that place which had so many memories, both good and awful, mostly terrible, knowing that he could rent his home as is and take only what he needed or wanted. However, what happened next was much more satisfying for Ryan. The elevator doors opened on the top floor of his family's headquarters. The hubbub came to a halt like a ghost had paid them a visit. He felt their gazes on him as he walked down the aisle to his father's office. I need to call you back. Ryan glanced inside his sister's office, where she instantly dropped her phone and sprang from her seat. Ryan, I'm delighted to see you, Sophie shouted with joy as she went to embrace her brother. It's been a long time since you've been here, she whispered, pushing herself away. Her gaze shifted downward, and she noticed the piece of paper in his palm. She had feared that this day would arrive. She hoped he could work through it, however. She could not blame her brother for wanting to distance himself from them. She pulled her brother back in. Whatever you do, I want you to be happy. Even if it means leaving us, just know you're my brother, and he'll always adore you. Just call and let me know you got to your destination safely. All right? Sure thing, sis, Ryan replied, rubbing her back. Dad is in his office. He's attending a meeting. Ryan, Sophie began, her eyes widening. Her hands rose to her mouth at the sight of her youngest son. Look at you. You look like a new guy, she cooed as she gripped his face with both hands. Here, Ryan said, handing up his resignation. What is this, Ryan? Are you sure you want this? His mother inquired curiously. I'm sure, Ryan nodded, his gaze looking over to his brother's office, noticing his smug smirk as if he had beaten him. Little did he realize that it was he who had won the most marvelous thing in the world, and what his brother thought was irrelevant to him. While I'll miss you, I hope wherever you end up offers you happiness. It already has, Ryan stated. It's Grace, right? Sophie inquired, smiling at his flushed cheeks. I knew it. Well, nice for her. She poked her brother's stomach. You should take care of yourself. Of course, and you should invite us to the wedding if there is one. His mother spoke with a kind grin. Come say farewell to your father before you leave, she said, reaching out and taking his hand. And who drew you away? His father inquired after his mother had filled him in. Just this company. Boston is managed by a really bright woman who recognizes it when she sees it, Ryan added, wishing to be by Grace's side again. I see, his father mumbled when his wife mentioned Grace's name. I hope you find what you were looking for. Son, kindly inform me if you encounter any difficulties. There is always a port in the storm here. With that, Ryan was on his way to Boston, carrying all of his stuff. His sister would manage his rental until she found someone to live in it. While he may not know what will happen next in his new experience, he knew one thing: his heart felt better and lighter as he covered more miles. Ryan, Grace's voice rang out over his car's speakers. Ryan drew a deep breath and announced, Honey, I'm coming home. 2 years later, Ryan chased Lexi as her tiny legs carried her away from her father, grinning as her delicate light brown hair floated in the air when her father picked her up from the floor. Her ruby plump cheeks rose, and she grinned. Grace watched with delight as the two interacted with one another. They got married just several weeks after he came to Boston. Sure, they had their fights, what couple doesn't? They worked through it, though. They knew they had something great, and they knew that even if they looked all over the world, they would never find someone as special as they were to one another. That's not fair. Grace pouted as she saw Ryan give Lexi a raspberry on her stomach. Where's mine? She inquired with a mischievous smirk. Well, my lady, if you follow me into the bedroom. Ryan wiggled his brow. Hold that thought. Grace spoke when her personal cell phone rang. Hold. Ryan murmured as he held Lexi up to the ceiling. Smartass. Grace mumbled low as she answered her phone. Mom, what's wrong? What? She found him? What are they doing? She's there now? She couldn't keep her wicked smile from showing as her mother told her how Isabella had come running home with her son crying, lying about how 6 different women had filed child support claims against him, and that upon learning this, his father and mother dug into his sales records, which had been light in recent months. They were filing charges against him for money laundering from corporate accounts. Isabella understood exactly what she was getting into. What do you want me to do about this? Seeing Ryan's wide smile as she put her phone on speaker, glancing down into Ryan's pocket as his own phone went off and stopped her call with her mother when she demanded that Grace worry for the fate of her sister, which Isabella was so willing to step into. I've heard. Ryan spoke in a cold and distinct tone. I do not know, Dad. Lexi needs to be watched. Fine, I'll do it for 20, Ryan said, letting his father go on and on about how good he was and how sad they didn't see it. However, I'm doing it from here. This is now my home. Damn correct it is, Grace mumbled severely, taking Lexi from him and beaming at their child as the setting sun showered them, knowing that this was how it was supposed to be. Thanks for watching this intense story of betrayal and new beginnings. Do you think Ryan made the right choices? Or could things have gone differently? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more.